Hey everybody, my name is Emily. Welcome back to my homestead and week 3 of the Three Rivers Challenge, a pantry challenge where our family will try to eat exclusively out of the stores we have in our home. Our family is only purchasing milk during these 2 months of the challenge. And this Sunday evening I am making sloppy joes. I start out by browning 2 pounds of ground beef, half of which I will save in a container for later use because that's double the amount we would usually need for this meal. That will make a quick meal later on. Next, I will dice up an onion and add that to the pot, as well as some green pepper that I have pre-diced in the freezer. Once the onions have cooked down to become clear, I will mince some garlic in there. I got this garlic press for Christmas, and I'm not completely sure that I like it yet, but we're going with it for now. And once that is added in, I will go ahead and drain the extra grease off of the pan, and then I will separate half of it out to save in the freezer. The next step is to add a can of tomato paste. Once I get this in the pan, I get everything mixed together and coated with the tomato paste, and then we are ready to add in a jar of home canned tomatoes. And then the spices. We've got paprika, chili powder, and parsley, salt, and pepper. That all gets a good mix in. Then we pop on the lid, let it come to a boil, and then take it down to simmer and simmer it for about 20 minutes. Meanwhile, I'm going to make some coleslaw for a side dish. This is cabbage from my garden this year, and I add it to my food processor to get it shredded up. Unfortunately, we hit a little bit of a snafu here, and you'll see that my food processor starts to smoke. Oh dear. What happened here is that my food processor broke a while back, and my younger sister tried to fix it. She made a 3D printed part on her 3D printer and put it back together, and it functioned, but she didn't actually test it on food. So I was not sure if this was going to work or not. I went ahead and took it apart and stuck the smoking part outside in the snow. And then, as you see here, there is a new food processor has come into the screen. My brother actually got me that for Christmas, so I had a feeling I might need to get it out, but I was hoping that the one my sister fixed would work for at least a little while. That was not the case. The new one works like a dream, though. Once the cabbage is all shredded up, I start working on carrots. These are the last of the carrots from my garden that have been harvested, and I'm going to go ahead and get them all peeled, the ends cut off, and then added to the food processor as well. And then added to the bowl with the rest of the cabbage from the first attempt at food processing. Next, on to the dressing. I have some coleslaw dressing that I made previously and froze in ice cube trays, and I'm going to go ahead and stick that all in a bowl and defrost it. Mix that in, and the coleslaw is ready. In fact, our meal is ready, and here it is all finished up and ready to go with the leftover buns from the hamburgers that we had last week. Monday evening, I realized I needed to bake some bread, so I started that before dinner, and I'm pulling it out of the bread machine and putting it into a loaf pan. I do not like to bake the bread in my bread machine. I prefer to let it do the first rise, pull it out, punch it down, put it in a loaf pan to rise in the oven. It seems to just turn out a lot better for me that way. While that's rising, I start on dinner. I've got some boiling water here that I'm salting, and then I will add in spaghetti noodles. Once they're cooked, I'll give them a quick drain, and then we will add in the leftover sloppy joe from the previous night, along with some herbs to make it more spaghetti-like. I'm adding oregano and basil, and then get everything mixed up, put the lid on, and let it simmer together until we're ready to eat. We call this Grandma's spaghetti, and it is a family favorite. By the time I'm finished making dinner, the bread has risen and it is ready to be baked. It comes out beautifully, and once it cools for 10 minutes, I turn it out onto a cooling rack, and once it is cooled completely, I slice it up. I had a lot of trouble baking bread during last year's pantry challenge. It was a fairly new thing for me, and I just hadn't got the knack of it. But now this particular recipe I've made many, many times without trouble. Now on to Tuesday. This morning I am getting the crock pot filled with a pork loin. I will add a quartered onion and several heads of garlic that are crushed, and then I will add in a jar of homemade green tomato salsa verde. This was already open in my fridge that we'd been using for chips once or twice, and it needs to be used up, so it's going in this crock pot. I've made this one other time. I got recipe inspiration from a beef roast with salsa verde, and I thought that would go great with pork. I've made it previously, and to be honest, it turned out way better the first time that I made it. This time, it wasn't nearly as good, and I'm not really sure what I did differently other than the cook time on the pork loin. But it was good, but it wasn't amazing like it was last time. I also add in some salt, pepper, cayenne, and cumin. Here's what it looks like ready to start. And I put the lid on and set it on low and cooked it for about 6 hours. Later that day, I decided to use the new cookbook I got from my sister for Christmas to make some bagels. My oldest child is old enough to have a job now, and they were about out of bagels, which they've been using for sandwiches lately, and said they were going to go to the store and get bagels and cream cheese spread, and I said, hold up. I know you don't have to adhere to the pantry challenge since you're technically an adult, but I can make bagels, and I can whip up a block of cream cheese we have in the fridge to make cream cheese spread. So that's what I did. It's actually fairly easy. It takes up a lot of time because there's a lot of waiting between, but overall the steps are pretty simple. Once the dough came out of the bread machine, I turned it out onto a floured surface, cut it up into 10 equal pieces according to the recipe, and then rolled them into long ropes that are about 10 inches long, and then twisted them into the bagel shape, tucking the ends under and pinching them together. Once all of these were shaped, I added them onto a baking sheet, and they needed to set for 30 minutes. This is what they look like shaped, and then I just covered them with a dry towel until the 30 minutes was up. The next step is to bring some water to a boil and add a little bit of brown sugar, and then you add the bagels 3 at a time into the water. They boil for about 3 minutes, turning occasionally. I think I turned each of them 3 times during the 3 minutes. And then you remove them from the water onto a rack to drain and dry off just a bit. While these were still moist, I went ahead and sprinkled them with everything bagel seasoning, because that's the kind of bagels that we like to have. And then we repeat the process until they're all done. They puffed up quite a bit when they were in the boiling water, which I thought was kind of neat. We've had this everything bagel seasoning for quite a while. I saw it at Sam's Club and I read the ingredients and was happy to see that there was no cornstarch in it. And so I purchased it thinking I'd make bagels, and it's taken me months to get around to it, but I'm glad that I finally did because it was satisfying. I've learned a new skill and learned how to make a new bread product and something that my family really likes, and very happy with how they turned out. They are definitely smaller than the store-bought bagels we are used to, and I think if or when I make these again, I will make less bagels, maybe 8 instead of 10, and so then would be a little bit bigger, I think, but they taste fantastic and they have a great texture. Now we've hit the evening where dinner is ready, or at least I hoped it was ready because we were really hungry. And it turns out that while the pork loin is fully cooked and totally edible and still tasted great, it was not shreddable, unfortunately, and that's kind of the goal. That's how it was the last time, and I think has a lot to do with why it wasn't as enjoyable this time. So it probably needed a couple more hours on low, or I should have probably started it out on high for an hour or two and then turned it down for low for the rest of the day. So instead of shredding it, I sliced it. Then I got the immersion blender and blended up the rest of the contents a little bit. Added the pork back to the sauce to coat it, because otherwise my kids probably wouldn't touch the sauce with the vegetables in it. And then we served it with some rice. On Wednesday, I am doing a lot of baking and getting ready for a party this evening. My family is going to have leftovers for dinner because we end up having a bunch of snacks at the party, and we just weren't too hungry, so we just kind of grazed on the leftovers in the fridge that evening. But I volunteered to bring cupcakes and some cookies, so here I'm making the cake batter. This recipe is maybe not the ideal recipe for cupcakes. They were very moist and everybody loved them, but they make more than 24. Thankfully, I have a third cupcake pan that I end up pulling out here in a second. But this party is for a friend in the garden club that I'm a part of, and she is moving away in the coming weeks, and we won't get to see her very often anymore, and we're all going to miss her, but her birthday was also coming up, so hence the cupcakes. These are going to be her birthday cake, and we wanted to throw her a surprise birthday party and going away party on this Wednesday evening. So once I got the cupcakes in the oven, I start making the buttercream frosting. I'm very excited to be using my new KitchenAid stand mixer that I got for Christmas, and I've always wanted a big stand mixer like this. I've got a smaller one, but it can't really handle anything more than a light cake batter, so this can definitely handle buttercream frosting and cookie doughs and things like that. I go ahead and decide to make this icing pink because that is the guest of honor's favorite color. And once it's finished, I will set it off to the side and wait for the cupcakes to finish cooling before I decorate. Next, I start working on some vegan chocolate chip cookies. One of the members of our garden club, her and her family, are vegan, or at least they don't eat dairy products. We haven't really deeply discussed it. but I found this recipe that I've been making every time we have a little get together where they will be involved, and it's a really good cookie recipe. It uses avocado oil instead of butter, and actually the original recipe called for olive oil, but you can totally taste that and it's not very appetizing, so I changed it to using avocado oil. I went ahead and made them extra small this time so that everybody could have a little bit of all the different things everybody brought to the party. We had, fruit salad and individual little ice creams and some vegan ice creams as well, chips and salsa and popcorn. Obviously, I didn't have the popcorn, but and here I am going ahead and decorating the cupcakes. I decided to make roses in the middle of the cupcakes, as the guest of honor's favorite flower is a rose. She loves roses, and I thought this would be a nice touch that she would enjoy. And of course, it's a garden club, so why not have a flower on your cupcake? And here is my contribution for our party this evening, ready to go. The next evening, which is Thursday evening, I decide to make a cheesy sausage and potato casserole. This has become a new favorite in the family over the past couple of years, and you start out by sauteing the kielbasa in a pan with both butter and oil. While that's cooking, I've got a pot of water heating up on the stove for potatoes, and I peel and dice potatoes for that. Next, I dice up an onion. The sausage is done cooking, so I pull that out and then add the diced onion and some diced green peppers. And then it's time to chop up some cabbage. That gets added to the pan once the peppers and onions are mostly cooked. The last component to this dish is a white sauce. So I get some butter melting in a pan, and I add milk to a jar, add the flour to that, and shake it all up. Once the butter is melted, I add salt and pepper, and then I can add the contents of that jar into the pot as well. This is what the vegetable mixture looks like. When it's finished, I add that to the bowl with the sausage as well as the potatoes. And once the white sauce has thickened up, I can add some shredded cheddar cheese to it, melt that, and we are ready to assemble the casserole. Again, I am putting this into 2 casserole dishes to have a freezer meal ready to go in the future. So I split the mixture between both casserole dishes, pour over the soup, sprinkle on a little bit more cheese, and then these are ready to go, one in the freezer when it cools off and one in the oven. And while that's baking, I go ahead and process the rest of the cabbage I have in the fridge. There was one that had started to go bad, and I didn't want to lose any more cabbage. So I get this diced up, put in a freezer bag, and it will be ready to grab out of the freezer and use when I want it. And here's the delicious casserole out of the oven, ready to serve. Friday night we had another leftovers night, but Saturday I am making some pizza. Again, I'm using the bread machine, and I like to add oregano and garlic powder to my pizza dough recipe. I divide the dough into 2 pieces and roll the first one out to the size of my pizza pan. Once I get that oiled on both sides, I put it on the pan and pop it in the oven to proof for half an hour. The other half is going to be put in a freezer bag. I'm going to attempt this as an experiment to see if I pull this out and thaw it, if it will turn out well. Once the dough has risen, I add some leftover pasta sauce, mozzarella cheese, and pepperoni for our toppings. I'll add this to a cold oven and then set the temperature to 500 degrees, and this will cook for about 20 minutes. Once it comes out of the oven, we usually let our pizza sit for about 10 minutes before slicing it up. And I got another new gadget for Christmas, this pizza cutter. And so I'm trying it for the very first time, and it cuts through pretty well except for the very edge of the crust that I have to pull apart with my fingers. And that's this week's meals. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as we enjoyed this delicious pizza. I can't wait to see you in the next video. Bye.